5 minutes.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Chairman, and for calling this hearing today, and thanks to our witnesses for being here. Ms. Hoffman, if I could ask you my first question. You noted that one of the reasons for the rapid electrical recovery in Florida was the nearly $3 billion in grid resiliency improvements since 2006. Could you elaborate as to what those improvements were? And will DOE be working with Florida going forward to identify additional hardening practices?
So thank you, sir, for the question. The investments by Florida really have stimulated from activities that looked at first situational awareness, so looking at advanced metering infrastructure to provide the situational awareness that we have been talking about, because once you have that awareness, you can do an outage management system. You can actually look at how you can advance and pre-position crews for a restoration process. It also has allowed for advanced switching to be able to minimize the amount of customers without power versus taking down a whole feeder system. You can really isolate damage on a system and look at restoration opportunities. Other things that the utilities have done is hardening their infrastructure by looking at stronger poles, looking at concrete poles, steel poles versus your traditional wooden poles. But all these capabilities are pulled together with an advanced kind of communications and control system, but a situational awareness system that can help with the restoration process.
Okay, besides you're talking about the different types of poles, are there other things that they were doing on hardening, did you say?
So with respect to substations of looking at, and this would probably go more for Sandy, but also looking at hardening substations and being able to
And how did they go about hardening the substations?
Pardon?
How do they go about hardening the substations?
So in hardening the substations, you really look at increased capabilities with respect to duration, being able to support prevention of damage from wind, but also from flooding. So it goes back to supporting the infrastructure so that you don't see the flooding damage that can occur.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Walker, if I could turn to you. Can you elaborate on working with the federal agencies after Hurricane Harvey? And could you see any improvements that need to be made between federal, state, local, industry, all working together out there? Or what's your view as to what happened, and is there anything that can be improved on?
I think there are improvements that we can make, and in my view is that the time to make those are before the next storm. I found myself in the State Operations Center addressing issues that I think are better to try to handle after the storm and get ready for the next one. Some have to do with the interconnection for the FEMA temporary housing. Some are
Could you elaborate on that, on the temporary housing? Because I know I've seen different press reports on that, but would you elaborate on the temporary housing with FEMA?
Once they bring in temporary housing, it's not set usually right at the meter that the house is on, so the utilities have to set a new pole. There's processes in Texas for each utility, and my guess is throughout the country for each utility, on how those processes are to interconnect a new customer, a new facility. And we would like to streamline that for all utilities in Texas. We had 5 major utilities impacted by Harvey, and then multiple co-ops and municipalities. And so we're hoping to have one process for FEMA to have to go through instead of multiple different processes. So that's an example.
Okay, any other examples you can think of that would be how to improve things out there?
We understood, or I understood during Hurricane Harvey, that there were issues, choke points as they were called during Hurricane Ike, related to the processes, inspection processes for cities to get homes reconnected once they're rebuilt, once they're remodeled. And so I think that's something we can address going forward, how those inspections are done, who does them, to make sure we have enough people on the ground. It was during recovery. It's not, to me, the time to try to be addressing things like that, and I just think that that's something we can look at going forward.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my time's just about expired, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now calls, excuse me,